Okay, today's notes are in two, or actually three different parts today, and we are adding rational numbers. So remember, rational number, any number that can be written as a fraction. And so let's go ahead and title this up here for your notes. Okay, so adding rational numbers, and even though that we're only really dealing with addition today, we're going to see subtraction because we have some that we're going to be adding a positive and a negative. And even though you're adding, because they have different signs, you end up subtracting them. So let's go through a couple examples. Now, before I said that we are dividing this up into three different sections, and the first section is dealing with the adding fractions themselves. And so we'll put a subtitle here. We're just going to be working with adding, so to add fractions. Okay, so let's draw a line here, and let's get into our first example then. And the first one we're going to look at is 11 over 12. And then we're going to add that to, and in this case, a negative 7 over 12. So you see that we have an addition problem here. So it's 11/12 plus, so it's addition. But that second fraction there, that 7/12, is a negative. And anytime we have a positive, which is what the 11/12 is, and a negative 7/12, we end up subtracting them. So let's break this down and look at it. We have a fraction, and we're adding, and the denominators are already the same. They're both 12. So this one's kind of an easy one. We're just going to go ahead and work through it. Now remember, when you're adding or subtracting fractions, that when you have the same denominator already, then that saves you a lot of work, because now we know that whatever we're going to do, we're just going to add or subtract the top in order to get the numerator, because we know the denominator is going to be 12. So we have a positive 11 plus a negative 7. So what you do is, because even though we're adding, because one's positive, one negative, you end up subtracting those. So we're going to get a 4, and then we're going to look at which one's larger, so the 7 or the 11. And because the 11 is larger, we're going to use its sign, and its sign is positive, so we leave that 4 as a positive. So we have 4 over 12. Now the 4 over 12 is not reduced yet. So looking at that, this one looks pretty simple. I know that 4 fits into itself one time, and 4 fits into 12 3 times. So our reduced fraction is 1/3. So just a real quick recap, we had this as our original equation that we were adding, and we had the same denominator, so it allowed us to use that denominator and simply subtract the top, giving us positive 4, because it was a negative 7 and positive 11. So if we subtract those, we get 4, and the 11 was bigger, which is positive, so we left it positive. And then finally, we simply reduce that. Okay, so let's move this up a little bit. So that's the first type of problem that you're going to have, and I'll leave that so it's still showing so we can start in the second one. Okay, what happens if we get into some mixed numbers? We're still doing the same thing, except for, let me divide this so we know we're looking at a different question now. Let's look at one that's a little bit different. What if we had a whole number, so we have 4, and then to that we're going to add another rational number. In this case, it's going to be a negative 1 2/3. Okay, so pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at this real quick. We know one's negative, one's positive, so really we need to change this and so that we're working with like terms. So the 4 right here, we already know that as a fraction is 4 over 1. And then the negative 1 2/3 is our mixed number, and we want to make that an improper fraction. So we're going to do two things. First of all, we're going to take that 4, let me get back to my pen, we're going to take that 4 right here, and we're going to make that a fraction, and then we're going to take this mixed number and we're going to make that a improper fraction. So the 4 is simply becomes 4 over 1, and to that we're adding And again, let's look at this, because you remember that to get that mixed number, you take that 3 and you multiply it by 1, and that still gives us 3, and then you add the top, and 3 plus 2 is 5, so now we have, and keep the negative in there, so negative 5 thirds. Go back to red there. Okay, so now we have 4 over 1 plus negative 5 over 3. So unlike the first one, the bottom one, the 4 over 1 plus 5, 3, doesn't have the same denominator. So we've got to change that. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now looking at the denominators, we have a 1 and a 3. And so I know that the smallest one that's common to both of those is going to be, and I'll switch back to white here, is going to be 3. So I know I'm going to use 3 as my common denominator there. Now on this one, we didn't change this 3 over here, so we can go ahead and put the negative 5 over there because nothing changed. But we did change the 4 over 1 to something over 3. And to get that 1 to be a 3, we had to multiply by 3 to get that over here. So again, if you do it to the bottom, you got to do it to the top. So we're going to multiply that 4 to 3 to get the numerator. So 4 times 3 is 12, and now we're back to and adding two fractions, two rational numbers that have the same denominator. So back to what we were doing before. Now because we're adding, we're going to keep the same denominator, so we know we're going to have a 3 there. And we have a positive 12 and a negative 5. So even though it says to add here, because those are different, we have to subtract them. So that's going to give us a 7. And then we go back and look at, we have the 5 and the 12 is bigger and it's positive, so we keep that. So I could put a plus here, but I'm not. We'll just leave it, and it indicates that it's a positive 7 over 3. And now we have to convert that 7 over 3, because it's an improper fraction, back into a mixed number. So 3 down here will go into 7 twice. So if it goes into twice, that gives us 6. So there's 1 left over. Okay, so that becomes 2 1/3. Okay, so lots of steps here, but things that we've been doing before, we're just now kind of putting them together to end up with an answer. So I'll briefly kind of just underline, let's use orange, because we started out with 4 plus, and here's your problem, 4 plus a negative 1 2/3. So from there, we converted it over to 4 over 1 plus 5 over 3. We got rid of that mixed number. And then we kind of went one step further here, and we made sure we had the same denominator. So we used 3, which we didn't change the negative 5/3, so we just wrote that over here. But we did change the 4 over 1, so we had to multiply the top and bottom by 3 to get those. So the 1 times 3 became 3, and then the 4 times 3 became 12. And that left us with this equation, which we can now go ahead and add. And so that gives us the 7/3, which we convert over to the 2 1/3. Okay, so those are the two types of problems that you're going to see on your homework today, and that's the end of our first section. So at this point, we have the first section of the homework that I'm going to give you 5 to 7 minutes. We'll see what it takes, you guys, and go ahead and work through those problems, and then once we're done, we'll go ahead and pick up on the second part, or part 2 of the notes.